everyone. Welcome to Risk Roundup. From artificial intelligence driven process automation, data analytics, digitization, robotics to internet, the rapidly emerging technological advances are on its way to revolutionize the biobanks, biorepository, and biospecimen science. While drug discovery and development seems to be the primary focus, biobank research hopes to provide novel insights into the genetic component of diseases, ultimately leading to a more personalized approach to healthcare. The rapidly growing investments and innovations are enabling the scientific progress that will strongly influence our knowledge about human health and disease, the quality and nature of healthcare, and our very human life. Understandably, biobanking is rapidly becoming a key area for infrastructure development and brings nations both risk and rewards. To discuss biobanking trends further, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. K. Stephen Su to Risk Roundup. Stephen Su is an expert for precision medicine topics and is achieving the concept of personalized medicine and biomarker-based population and patient selection for clinical testing platforms. He is currently the president of Diosign based in United States. Welcome, Dr. Su. We are so very honored to have you on Risk Roundup.
Thank you for inviting me.
Wonderful, Dr. Su. So it seems that collection of plants or animal microbes and other non-human materials can also be described as biobanks. But for the discussion today, we will restrict the term for human specimens. So from human specimen perspective, how would you describe the evolution of biobanks today?
The biobanking is a very broad term. You could be biobanking plant seeds. You could be biobanking various types of virus. You could be biobanking various types of bacteria, various tissue types. So biobanking is a very broad term, and some people, some field have specified directly to name their facility, such as a tissue banking or tissue repository, or biospecimen repository, or human specimen bank, and all sorts. Different people named it differently. And he has evolved in great need since 15 years ago, because it's a very important resource to do proper research on anything, for betterness for the betterness of treating different diseases. And it has grown into a big field, especially in the field of personalized medicine, precision, but also in the field of microbiome, the field of livestock, research. Both commercially and academically. Government agencies are starting to look very seriously into the field of biobanking. So I would say it has become really a huge field in the field of human disease,
Yes.
Animal diseases. In every area, it's just kind of exploding. And the different sectors, whether the academia, government, or industry sectors, they all start to realize the importance of biobanking.
Yes, very
So I would say it has grown into a huge sector.
Yes, it is. I read somewhere that it's considered to be one of the top 10 ideas that would change the world. And that is, itself, it shows it's very big. And especially we see that modern healthcare is in crisis from the perspective that the drug development has slowed down. There are not that many drugs in development, and there is an increasing demand for high quality and high specific treatments to diverse pathologies. Because if we look at it, neurodegenerative diseases or cardiovascular diseases, cancer or obesity or diabetes or autoimmune diseases, there are so many different kind of diseases that need a different kind of approach and treatment. And it seems that the molecular research that underlies this new treatment development is greatly being driven by the all these samples, different kinds of material and samples that are, and the information that is available from these so-called biobanks. So from, as you just described, that it could be many different things. It could be microbiomes, it could be bacteria, viruses. But from your knowledge, how many different types of biobanks are there? I mean, is it restricted to just tissues or cell lines or viruses, bacteria, or does it include even more?
I would say, in a broad sense, as I mentioned, biobank is a very broad term. Unless you specify people in the field working in human diseases, we just simply take it when someone mentions biobank, we're talking about a human tissue. But people working in the field of virus, microbiome, bacteria, when they refer to their biobank, is completely different types of biobank. So it's a very broad term, and I think
It is.
I could easily think of more than 10 different types of biobank, including plant seeds. There are biobank that stores
Right.
various types of plant seeds, plant types, agricultural types. For example, different corns and different agricultural products. So I think you're mainly referring to human diseases, but
Yes.
there are various types. I would say definitely about a dozen. I could come up in my head. Definitely a dozen different biobank types, and that all depends on which field that you're coming from.
Yes, I mean that I read that there are a lot of biobanks that focuses on diseases, like they focus on either cancer or some autoimmune disease or some kind of cardiovascular disease. So there are disease oriented biobanks, and then there are also community biobanks, like population based biobanks. So there are many different, and stem cells biobanks where they have different kinds of stem lines, and all the way to virtual biobanks. So there is a the tissue
Yes,
bank, that tissue bank that you mentioned, that also is very, very important. Especially it's becoming very critical to understand the whole environment of any disease. If you talk about some cancer, what changes happens in the tissues, that because understanding that will help us identify the biomarkers that would help us quickly diagnose the disease. So there is a lot that is going on, and there are many different approaches. But I see that a lot of the effort is on identifying biomarkers in human bodies, so that it's easy for diagnosis, and we can diagnose the disease happening at a very early stage. But I nowhere, when I was doing research on this, nowhere I found any information about identifying the environmental markers. Because if we look at the history, there is a lot of information given about where in certain countries there is certain diseases are more, and in certain parts, even in certain parts of the country, there are locations where there are certain kind of diseases happening. So there must be something in the environment that also play a role in the disease onset. So while there I saw a lot of effort in identifying biomarkers from the tissue sample to understand what is the changing in the protein, and what are other developments happening in the tissues when there is an onset of disease. But nowhere I found any information about the environmental markers. Do you have any information whether anybody is focusing on that?
um, I cannot come up right in the names of those in my head, but there are banks, different types of banks that stores different materials. If you're talking about environmental factors, that depends on pollution in the air, or different soil, different air, depending on the region where there are a lot of factories. People are collecting a lot of things and putting into banks. I mean, I wouldn't say they are biobank, but there are different banks.
I see.
And as you said in your statement, it's very important to store things for the research purpose so
Yes.
that we could utilize them to identify markers,
Yes.
environmental markers, biomarkers, and so on. And as you said, it's a disease-based. There are biobanks that are disease-based, cancer, diabetes, and so on. They're also phenotypic-based. Just the extreme example is, just there are banks that just collects certain phenotypes, people with certain phenotypes on their skin, on their eyes.
Yes.
Um, and so I mean it's a huge field.
Yes.
It's a huge field, and everybody banks different thing, and this has been going on for decades, and everybody knows about banking, and it has been done a lot of sense long time ago in individual laboratories for whatever the topic that the investigator is working on. But recently, there's an emergence of banking where people form consortiums to bring disease types together, blood types together, phenotypes together,
Right.
bacteria together. Um, this is very explosive, as you mentioned. It plays a very important role in identifying
Yes.
what causes a certain disease, certain phenotype, and so on.
Right, right. So, I mean, you see more integrated approach that the consortiums are forming and people are coming together, institutions, our organizations, and trying to work together to solve that. Yes, that is definitely welcoming. But I mean, I see that initially, I mean, as we know that when we were trying to research genetic disorders, scientists would look at the genes that they expect that would be causing that disorder, and we'll look at the mutations happening in those specific genes. Like if you look at for breast cancer, then BRCA1 or BRCA2, those kind of specific mutations they were looking for. But now it seems that scientists are looking at not just at one gene, but they are looking at many genes, because it there is a new understanding that there's a lot of diseases originate not just from one single defective gene, but many genetic diseases are caused by multiple genetic factors on multiple genes. So how is the research strategy evolving from looking at only single genes and mutations on single genes to multiple genes and the entire genome to understand how diseases are forming?
I think the future trend, ever since National Institute of Health (NIH) sequence human genome, people start to deposit a lot of different gene sequences in different data repositories. In terms of a mutation that you mentioned, I think world's one of the largest mutation databases in UK called Cosmic Database, run by Sanger Institute. So there are a lot of things being deposited, and those are, like you said, a virtual type of a sequence-based biobank where people just simply have millions and millions of mutations. There are banks that has a lot of data. National Library of Medicine at NIH has a huge amount of data there as well. But as the future progresses, the DNA sequencing becomes cheaper and cheaper, and these days robotics basically takes care of a sequence. We don't sequence DNA in liquid handling mode anymore. And human hands anymore. Is all sample in, sequence out type of massive automated robotic based sequencing. And eventually the sequencing cost gonna go so low that human genome will be sequenced within a week or within a day. So eventually, where the future is going to be, um, that human genome will be sequenced, and it might become mandatory for every patient's genome will be sequenced. And once it's all sequenced, it's matter of computing power, and computing power is becoming faster and more robust. And all this analytics come into play, all these different types of bioinformatics, electronic medical record dissection, and so on. So so at the end of the day, it's gonna be a machine learning, and it could definitely go into very soon a deep machine learning, and then of course artificial intelligence or various types of algorithms will come together to mine what mutation out of a, let's say, population. For example, let's say, imaginarily speaking, there's a region in a parts of the world where people live 50 years longer than other average population. So, what mutation is causing it? What gene expression is causing it? What are the differences in gene DNA sequences? People will be identifying those kind of things from those type of biobanks. In terms of breast cancer, you mentioned there are a few major mutations where we know and how they come about, and drugs discoveries being made. But after we compile a human genome sequence of all breast cancer patients of hundreds of thousands, and different algorithmic artificial intelligence and machine learning start to dig in, it's going to be able to find mutations or simply SNP, some difference in sequence somewhere tucked away in intron rather than exon, to identify reasons why people get those diseases. We found that reasons why some patients' tumor progresses more rapidly. That we'll find that reasons why, based on DNA sequence, it may not be everything. It might not be everything of the causal effect, but we be able to really start to pin down faster and in more robust way what mutation, what change of the sequence is causing disease to progress faster, more aggressively, and why certain things increase the mortality higher than the other population that we compare as a control. So
Yes, yes,
you're absolutely correct. The future's gonna be a lot in DNA based, but and it's gonna be human genome based. There are ethical issues about that. For example, if I sequence your genome and we found out that you're gonna have diabetes, some severe diabetes type 2 by when you're 55, are we gonna start to charge you a higher insurance rate just because the machine found out from your genome sequence that you're gonna have a more complication?
yes,
It's a really huge field to talk about,
yes,
and there are a lot of ethical issues involved when human genome sequencing becomes mandatory. I personally have a feeling that at one day, let's say 10 years from now, uh, because of the rise of the healthcare cost, um, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that government decides to make that mandatory so that that the reimbursement side and the insurance companies prepare better. Just simply one smokes pack a day, that person's the medical care cost for that person for the lifetime might be much smaller than someone that we didn't know about, but now we know because of we found these mutations or alteration of DNA sequence, and based on the human genome sequence, we found that person B, we expect to spend millions more than the person A who smokes pack a day or alcoholic, or whatever. So
yes,
I think that's where the future is gonna be eventually, and the either a commercial entity, and I think it's gonna be a commercial entity rather than academic or government entity, that sets up an infrastructure that could analyze this hundreds and millions and billions of human genome sequence by using some sort of a supercomputing power. And I personally think anybody who set up the structure in the most vast and robust and in the quantity wise is China. They are setting up a huge AI supercomputing infrastructure, and entities like that will be able to take on this huge analysis. Sequencing is gonna be easy because, as I said, it's gonna be more automated, more robotic based. But it's the analytics part. The human's not gonna be able to, by any means, with current. We're getting better, but not with the current computing infrastructure. But it's gonna get better and better, and then one day, there will be an entity or entities, maybe in each continent. Who knows? They will be able to suck up millions and billions worth of human genome sequence and be able to compile and dissect based on the phenotype, disease type, whatever, and figure out what mutations cause what and what alteration of DNA causes what. And that could be definitely like a bit due to environmental factors, like
Yes.
as you mentioned. Yeah.
Yes or no, you are right. I mean, these changes seems like imminent and they are coming our way, but they're also going to create a lot more complex challenges other than privacy, because it's also security and discrimination. I mean, since if, let's say, the entity that controls that data, they know
Right.
they know from the beginning who is going to develop what, and that data leaks, then there will be discrimination from employers, who they hire, who they don't hire, and also that data, if privacy is not maintained properly, then there are security challenges. Right now, we are seeing the hacks happening for financial data and all that, but going forward, if there is a hack into these biobanks, then the hackers would get so much more information. That would be
Right.
so dangerous in the coming years.
Yes, it will be very dangerous if something like that happens, and it's ethical issues and so on. But at the end of the day, I believe the humanity will benefit from all these technologies. There will be glitches, like everything else that we see as we encounter new technologies and more privacy issues. But I don't think there's any way you could get away from that because worldwide, the healthcare cost is rising and is expensive. We expect American population in U.S. the household income will match the insurance cost within 10 years. That's how expensive the insurance cost is rising in U.S. and the countries that offers government-based subsidized healthcare. Everybody has to come up with some policy to overcome that cost because it's going to be expensive. So, in order to prevent the government or private sector, they will put a fence around certain things. And even though there's a worries about privacy, even though there's a worries about technical hacking, so on and so forth, I don't think we'll get away from that because um, uh, I think in order to reduce global healthcare cost for various different countries, especially U.S., there's got to be some sort of a fence for somebody to monitor whether you need to change your diet, whether you need to change your a daily habit, whether you need to change something to reduce the healthcare costs that we see forthcoming based on your genomic sequence, for example.
Yes.
And biomarker is the same. I mean, if we start to pump out more biomarkers for certain disease, there might be. And it's already happening. The companies and different big companies, government agencies, and others putting kind of a semi-mandatory for you to do once a year complete checkup, twice a year complete checkup, so that they could kind of monitor you. So if your blood pressure is going up, they try to, bring forth the prevention medicine side so that you could take blood pressure medicine early. If they see sign of blood sugar rising, they might, and you happen to have a biomarker for diabetes, they might put you on medicine early. The prevention medicine is where the future is gonna go. Uh, Nobody's gonna like patients coming into the hospital with full blown disease, and if you didn't take prevention measures that might be put in as a format of a policies or bylaws or whatever laws, you might not be able to get fully covered from the reimbursement side. You might have to pay more out of your pocket because you didn't follow those type of policies. So, you know,
Yeah.
this is where the futures are things are gonna go, and biomarkers, as you said, the biobanking um, plays a huge role as we move into the future.
Yes, so it seems now, I mean, you mentioned good points about the privacy, ethics, and security. I mean, some things are going to be unavoidable, like you said, that we would see some hacks, initially until we figure out how to secure these kind of databases. Because anything that is digitized, is going to be at risk because hackers can get into pretty much anywhere, any database. So we will have to, until we find that effective security solution, and there are some, that are in development which would help us secure the databases more effectively, because the new encryption models are coming that will be very helpful. But there is also another aspect of the samples collected, and it is about the integrity of the sample. Because I was just looking, we had a discussion on the national ID Aadhaar database that happened in India. And when you have to collect the data, biometric data from the entire human population within a country, then maintaining the integrity of that data to make sure that the biometric data is about the person who actually says that person is very difficult. And I think it's going to be same for biobanks also, because when we try to collect data from the population, for a large number of people within a country, then maintaining that integrity of the sample is a very complex challenge. So how are the biobanks or any of these initiatives trying to maintain the integrity of the sample collected?
Yes, that's the most important thing about biobanking is the integrity, and I know for sure that that's where everybody kind of get messed up. You know, a policy pushes forward something coming from the upside to push for biobanking, so people start to collect samples, but a lot of people who collect samples um, do not pay attention to the integrity. People on the upper side cares about it, but people who are actually procuring samples on the bottom side, either not educated and doesn't know the significance of how fast they have to move from the time of biospecimen collection to the freezing point and storing point and processing point, or they simply do not care because they're busy with whatever their daily workload. So the integrity gets compromised at a lot of collection sites, no matter where. And what's worst is that all the money that's either in the format of grant, a format of funding, or a different format of funding, grants that's given to researchers at government, private, academia side, and they are kind of happy to have these patient samples and biobank samples coming toward them with some disease information or clinical information attached to it, not knowing the integrity of those biosamples, and then they end up spending tens of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, if it's a huge project that could easily go through, hundreds, millions of dollars, when you combine all this money spent on research using biosamples that have a poor integrity.
Yeah.
And what happens at the end of the day is that at the end of the day, if you put junk sample in up front, in the front end, on the back end, you're gonna get a junk data.
That is.
Um, and depending on what set of biosamples that you use, and not knowing the integrity, um, people who use 70% really high quality biosamples mixed with 30% junk, you might get some semi okay uh, data output at the end, and you might be able to use some of it. But if you happen to have the opposite, where 70% of your biosample that you got somewhere, um, and 30% of them are actually high quality, good, with high integrity biosamples. At the end of the day, on the back end, you're going to get a junk data, and you think you found some biomarker for that disease, for whatever the phenotype that you're going after. You think you find an answer, but it's an artifact.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people working with samples out there thinking that they found diamonds in the sand, and they could be totally artifact. And that actually, down toward the end of the line where people start to do drug discoveries, and starting to identify or make drugs against those biomarkers that came from some junk samples, you end up using a lot of money, and not finding anything at the end, and failing clinical trials and losing millions and billions of dollars. So you are exactly correct. When you try to do that, for example, in India, and collecting them and keeping the high integrity is extremely difficult, it's because people on the other side who are actually collecting, and not people on the upper side who knows the importance of integrity, but people who are actually on the other side collecting, either they are extremely busy with their workload, so they don't pay enough attention, or they're not educated about the significance of the biosample integrity. And on the pharma side, they have no control of people who are procuring biosamples on the other side, either in the clinic or in the hospital or anywhere, collecting blood from a population, from a village. You don't know how they're collected and how they're processed, and you don't know how long samples been sitting outside in the room temperature. You don't know how it was processed. And it gets passed on to the pharma, to the researcher, government, academia, industry, and everybody works on it. And I think there's a huge silo and a gap that has to be filled in from beginning to end, very front end to the very back end. And this has to be coordinated at a government policy level. Even the institutional policy is pushing it. If you don't pay attention to educating these people, it doesn't work. And I found out personally, from my experience, that a person who really hold the key on the integrity, I found out after I did everything I could, and I still see bad, low integrity samples during my quality control. The people that were really important was the courier,
Yeah.
believe it or not. The people who pick up the sample and deliver to the biobank, we found out that they were not educated, and even the people up in the front end did all good job procuring right away as soon as the biosample was removed from the time of diagnosis, from the time of the surgery, whatever. But people who deliver them didn't deliver on time. Either they're sitting in their delivery bag, or they got called on and asked to do something else, and they end up diverged from delivering the sample to the biobank, and they rather spend a few hours doing some other things because they were called on to do something else. and then later on deliver the sample to the biobank and turn out to be a junk sample. So, that's just an example. But everybody has to be educated from front end to the back end, especially the front end. And a lot of people forget this front end. I think which is messing up a lot of biobanking initiatives and wasting money at the back end. But people have to be educated in the front end really well in order to properly maintain the high integrity of the biosample so that we discover great biomarkers and various types of markers and discover drugs.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I agree with you on that. But do we not have in standards right now established for these kind of initiatives, like effective processes, guidelines?
Oh, everybody has standard protocols and SOPs and so on, but it's matter of how many people following it. For example, let's say you have a clinic in one country, and in that one country, let's say you have a 5,000 hospital, and you have a clinic that ranks in top 100. They may do a better controlling SOPs and better educating their workers and people who are procuring on the front end. But what about the rest of on the lower ranking hospitals or clinic who doesn't have that infrastructure, who doesn't have well educated front end workers? Um, you know, what do you do? That's a different issue. And what if those out of 5,000 hospitals, what if those um, 1,000 hospitals on the lower ranking side are the one who are more actively distributing their samples because they need to recover cost for running their biobank, and people at the other end, at the back end, pharma and researchers end up using those samples that were collected from poorly procured environment. And think about the data output on the back end. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes, yes, yes,
So it's not a simple problem. It has to be very well controlled at the level of policymaking
yes,
and government, institutional, and it has to be carefully controlled and monitored. But really, the front end and everywhere from beginning to back end, people has to be well educated. The
yes.
significance of maintaining high integrity biosamples.
Yes, I hear you, and I think some initiatives are emerging about 2 year programs to train the people who handle this kind of samples. So maybe in the coming years it will get better. But what are you, as you look at this field broadly? I mean, you have worked in this field for so many years. So as you look at it broadly, what concerns you the most about the biobank's ability to deliver on its promise for the future of personalized medicine and solving the problems facing healthcare?
I believe the importance of biobanking and proper biobanking, accurate precision biobanking is critical for precision medicine and personalized therapies. It's absolutely critical. I think a lot of people overlook that. I think a lot of people do not understand, like you are pointing to, the importance of the front end, where the samples are actually procured. I don't think government policymakers understand. One time I went down to the National Institute of Health, NIH, and I spoke and lectured about that importance of the front end. And I requested there should be a better funding for biobanking and a better controlled environment, and government should step in, and so on and so forth. But that was 10 years ago, and I don't see a huge difference 10 years later. Um, that means the government policymakers um, have to understand, even though they're not bio-related, they have a background who are not bio-related, even though they don't understand this nitty-gritty about the medicine,
Yes.
It's a simple concept. They need to be educated as well.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Decision makers need to, regulators and policymakers, they need
Yes.
to be educated first so they understand the importance of these. Now, do you see these challenges only in United States, or do you see challenges with all the countries that are dealing with the biobanks?
I see challenges in US because I experienced this environment, and in the United States supposedly have we spend a lot of money on it, and we try to do our best with regulations and compliances and so on and so forth. Other countries globally, um, the countries that spends more money and try to do a good biobanking, I think probably do better. But countries who overlook this problem and do not really understand this issue of integrity of the biobanking and all different arms that needs to be monitored and controlled. Those countries biobanking, and if samples are there, I'm not sure if I want to use that for my research.
Right,
So you know, if it's a fixed or frozen tissue, but then again, you don't know when you fix the tissue or freeze the tissue. Maybe the tissue was left out in the operating room for a day, then you freeze it and fixed it, and then they start to distribute those samples.
right, right.
Um, so I still see we have some way to go, and it's sad to see that biopharma and government spends millions, hundreds of millions of dollars for many years. So it could be easily multi-billions of dollars going into research, and pay attention. They don't pay attention in really tightly regulating the quality, regulating the policies or the SOPs, so on and so forth, in order to maintain high quality biosamples so that the research money, no matter where they are, the funding is coming from, so that research money doesn't get wasted. I see a lot of wasted fund because of the biobank samples that they're passing on to the other end doesn't meet the high integrity standard.
Right, right. No, I understand that. So, what would you like to tell our global viewers and listeners, especially about your research or new initiatives or publications or affiliation?
Uh, I don't. You mean the one that I run now, the diagnosing?
Sure.
Oh no, this this is a company that I run on a side. My wife is actually my wife's company. This is a sales, marketing, distribution company. We import various reagents worldwide, and we distribute here in U.S. So I'm not gonna give a sales talk about that, since this is a biobanking related topic.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
So
and
you have moved.
it's a side thing.
I see.
Yeah, and I was extremely busy running a organization for a couple of years, so I had to stop my research running the organization. But I will be going back to the bench. But in terms of biobanking, I think is your background on biomedicine, Joshua?
My background is I have a PhD in microbiology, but I have done a lot of work in anti-cancer
Okay,
drugs and biotechnology and all. So I
okay.
have a very good understanding about this field.
Okay, I sense that. I sense that from the people that I've talked to, I would say you are one of the people who really knows the importance of biobanking. And not many people, they know it's important, but they don't understand the nitty gritty part of the importance of biobanking, because this is the front end. On the back end, there are a lot of money just going down, and some artifacts are being used for drug discovery and so on. Eventually, they find out, but
Right.
you know what I mean.
Yes, yes, of course. So yes, you're right. There's a lot of investment happening, but there's also a lot of ignorance. So a lot of controls are not established and not paid attention to. But this is such a huge field, it will shape the coming tomorrow for the humanity. So I hope that there is more attention given, more focus given. Not even all countries have biobanks at this point. Some, only some countries have biobanks. So I hope that every country focuses on this and establishes the biobank so they can understand the cause of diseases and how to prevent it in a timely manner, and how to come up with effective drugs and have personalized medicine. So I this field is very, very important. So thank you
Yes.
yes, thank you so much, Dr. Su, for participating in Risk Roundup today. I hope you go back to biobanking field and do some research and come up with some effective biomarkers for the future of healthcare and future of humanity. So we appreciate your thoughtful insight on everything you shared with us, and our global viewers and listeners will benefit tremendously from the information you provided, and we thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you, Joshua, for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Su. So, Risk Roundup, a global initiative launched by Risk Group, is a security risk reporting for risk emerging from existing and emerging technologies, technology convergence, and transformation happening across cyberspace, aquaspace, geospace, and space. We at Risk Group believe that risk management, security, and peace, they walk together hand in hand. Though security is related to management of threats and peace to the management of conflict, risk management is related to the management of security vulnerabilities as well as management of conflict. And it is not possible to conceive any one of the three without the existence of the other two. All three concepts feed into each other. We believe that the security we build for ourselves is precarious and uncertain until it is secure for everyone across nations. Tradition becomes our security, so if we build a culture of managing risk effectively, it will lead us to security, and security will lead us to peace. Let's manage the existing and emerging risks together. For more information on the risk roundups, to watch the risk roundup video audio podcast, please go to riskgroupllc.com and do not forget to subscribe and share. Until next time, I'm Jayashree, host of Risk Roundup, signing off. See you next time. Thank you.